others have settled that. The chemical elements are only another disappointment in the quest of the positive as the definite, the homogeneous, and the stable. If there were real elements, there could be a real science of chemistry. Upon November 12th and 13th, 1902, occurred the greatest fall of matter in the history of Australia. Upon the 14th of November it rained mud in Tasmania. It was, of course, attributed to Australian whirlwinds. But according to the Monthly Weather Review, 32/365, there was a haze all the way to the Philippines, also as far as Hong Kong. It may be that this phenomenon had no special relation with the even more tremendous fall of matter that occurred in Europe, February, 1903. For several days, the south of England was a dumping ground from somewhere. If you'd like to have a chemist's opinion, even though it's only a chemist's opinion, see the report of the meeting of the Chemical Society of London, April 2nd, 1903. Mr. E.G. Clayton read a paper upon some of the substance that had fallen from the sky, collected by him. The Sahara explanation applies mostly to falls that occur in southern Europe. Farther away, the conventionalists are a little uneasy. For instance, the editor of the Monthly Weather Review, 29/121, says of a red rain that fell near the coast of Newfoundland early in 1890: "It would be remarkable if this was Sahara dust." Mr. Clayton said that the matter examined by him was "merely wind-borne dust from the roads and lanes of Wessex." This opinion is typical of all scientific opinion, or theological opinion, or feminine opinion, all very well except for what it disregards. The most charitable thing I can think of, because I think it gives us a broader tone to relieve our malices with occasional charities, is that Mr. Clayton had not heard of the astonishing extent of this fall, had covered the Canary Islands on the 19th, for instance. I think, myself, that in 1903 we passed through the remains of a powdered world, left over from an ancient interplanetary dispute brooding in space like a red resentment ever since. Or, like every other opinion, the notion of dust from Wessex turns into a provincial thing when we look it over. To think is to conceive incompletely, because all thought relates only to the local. We metaphysicians, of course, like to have the notion that we think of the unthinkable. As to opinions, or pronouncements I should say, because they always have such an authoritative air of other chemists, there is an analysis in Nature, 68/54, giving water and organic matter at 9.08%. It's that carrying out of fractions that's so convincing. The substance is identified as sand from the Sahara. The vastness of this fall. In Nature, 68/65, we are told that it occurred in Ireland, too. The Sahara, of course, because, prior to February 19th, there had been dust storms in the Sahara, disregarding that in that great region there's always, in some part of it, a dust storm. However, just at present, it does look reasonable the dust had come from Africa, via the Canaries. The great difficulty that authoritativeness has to contend with is some other authoritativeness. When an infallibility clashes with a pontification, they explain. Nature, March 5th, 1903, another analysis. 36% organic matter. Such disagreements don't look very well, so in Nature, 68/109, one of the differing chemists explains. He says that his analysis was of muddy rain, and the other was of sediment of rain. We're quite ready to accept excuses from the Most High, though I do wonder whether we're quite so damned as we were, if we find ourselves in a gracious and tolerant mood toward the powers that condemn. but the tax that now comes upon our good manners and unwillingness to be too severe. Nature, 68 223. Another chemist. He says it was 23.49% water and organic matter. He identifies this matter as sand from an African desert. But after deducting organic matter. But you and I could be identified as sand from an African desert after deducting all there is to us except sand. Why can we not accept that this fall was of sand from the Sahara, omitting the obvious objection that in most parts the Sahara is not red at all, but is usually described as dazzling white? The enormousness of it, that a whirlwind might have carried it, but that, in that case, it would be no supposititious or doubtfully identified whirlwind, but the greatest atmospheric cataclysm in the history of this earth. Journal Royal Meteorological Society, 3056. That, up to the 27th of February, this fall had continued in Belgium, Holland, Germany, and Austria, that in some instances it was not sand, or that almost all the matter was organic, that a vessel had reported the fall as occurring in the Atlantic Ocean, midway between Southampton and the Barbados. The calculation is given that in England alone 10 million tons of matter had fallen. It had fallen in Switzerland. Simon's Meteorological Magazine, March, 1903. It had fallen in Russia. Bulletin Communication Geology, 2248. Not only had a vast quantity of matter fallen several months before in Australia, but it was at this time falling in Australia. Victorian Naturalist, June, 1903. Enormously red mud, 50 tons per square mile. The Wessex explanation. Or that every explanation is a Wessex explanation. By that I mean an attempt to interpret the enormous in terms of the minute, but that nothing can be finally explained, because by truth we mean the universal, and that even if we could think as wide as universality, that would not be requital to the cosmic quest, which is not for truth, but for the local that is true, not to universalize the local, but to localize the universal, or to give to a cosmic cloud absolute interpretation in terms of the little dusty roads and lanes of Wessex. I cannot conceive that this can be done. I think of high approximation. Our intermediatist concept is that because of the continuity of all things, which are not separate, positive, or real things, all pseudo-things partake of the undertaking, or are only different expressions, degrees, or aspects of the underlying. So then, that a sample from somewhere in anything must correspond with a sample from somewhere in anything else. That, by due care in selection, and disregard for everything else, or the scientific and theological method, the substance that fell February 1903 could be identified with anything, or with some part or aspect of anything that could be conceived of. With sand from the Sahara, sand from a barrel of sugar, or dust of your great-great-grandfather. Different samples are described and listed in the Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, 3057, or we'll see whether my notion that a chemist could have identified some one of these samples as from anywhere conceivable is extreme or not. Similar to brick dust, in one place. Buff or light brown, in another place. Chocolate colored and silky to the touch and slightly iridescent. Gray. Red rust color. Reddish raindrops and gray sand. Dirty gray. Quite red. Yellow-brown with a tinge of pink. Deep yellow clay color. In nature, it is described as of a peculiar yellowish cast in one place, reddish somewhere else, and salmon colored in another place. Or there could